Jim Duquette, he joins us every week, former Mets and Orioles GM, current host of MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. A Monday visit brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. Perfect night spot for date night, guys night, ladies night, large group event. You can visit one of their 6 great locations across the Northwest at flatstickpub.com. This is it. This is the last visit. I don't like it, Jim Duquette.
Goes fast, man. It goes fast. The season goes fast, Buck. I can't even believe that we're into the postseason starting tomorrow. I'm excited about it, but like we're game 162, except for right now, there's game 161 and 162 for 2 teams, the Mets and the Braves. But yeah, I can't. Season's over.
So as we're doing this right now, it's so if people are listening later, just on the podcast, the Braves are leading the Mets 2-0. They're in the 4th inning. They're playing a doubleheader today. It doesn't behoove any of these teams to sweep them. Like, it doesn't benefit them. All right.
Right.
But so if, let's say, the Braves hold on to win, what do they do in game 2? Do they go bullpen by committee? How do they handle it?
So they go bullpen by committee, and Chris Sale's the guy that they have. He's their best pitcher all season. He's probably going to be the Cy Young winner in the National League. But they're not going to use him. They're going to use him for game 1 tomorrow. Right. In that scenario you talked about. So yeah, they go bullpen. They go non-bullpen guys that will be in the mix for tomorrow. So it's a huge advantage for the Mets in game 2, and really, right. It really puts Arizona, who's the 3rd team in this mix, at a disadvantage. If the Mets get swept, Arizona sneaks in through the side door, which is how they kind of got in the postseason last year and made that great run to the World Series. And they had a better season than they did last year, but they could be on the outside looking in. The Mets will have their best pitch, one of their best pitchers, Luis Castillo, obviously former Yankees, had a really good year, and he's going to pitch in game 2 if the Mets lose, which would give them a leg up against the Braves. Because again, if I'm Atlanta, I'm not starting my key guys. Any of my starters that are going to, they need a break for tomorrow. It's like, I'm not starting Michael Harris. I'm not starting, maybe you start Marcell Ozuna, but Ozzie Albies isn't getting in. Any of those key, Matt Olson, who plays every single day, I wouldn't start him. I think they all get that game off in the second half here, or the second game.
How do you balance that, though? I mean, does one of these teams, let's say it's Atlanta, do they owe it to baseball? Do they owe it to Arizona to try and win? Or you're like, nope, they only owe it to themselves. They have to look out for number 1, and that's it.
They made a decision. I'll answer that question. It's a really good question. By just look at how they made their pitching decisions from Saturday until tomorrow. They had Chris Sale on extra days rest, and he lost some velocity his last start, so they were giving him extra rest. But Max Fried pitched Friday. They put Ronaldo Lopez, who had been on the injured list for 15 days. He pitched Saturday, pitched really well. They had a chance to not even play today if they started Chris Sale yesterday against the Kansas City team, who had nothing to play for. Right? They're just playing out the season because they're playing against the Orioles tomorrow. They could have started Chris Sale, and they wouldn't even be in this situation, because if as it turned out, now we know it with hindsight, but if the Braves and the Mets won, they weren't playing today. That eliminated Arizona from the mix. So they're playing a long game in this, and a part of the long game is you can't play your guys in the second game of this doubleheader if you win game 1. They've already told you what what they think. They're trying to make these decisions based on, hey, we're going to advance past the wild card and into the DS hopefully this weekend.
Yeah, well, it'll be fun kind of watch how it all plays out, and it's fascinating to watch the game taking place right now. All right, let's get to the Mariners. They get in the last game on the last series of the year, Jim, and it means nothing, obviously, because they're eliminated from the postseason. Let's just start. This is very open-ended. What went wrong for them this year?
I mean, it seems simplistic to say it was solely the offense, but for the most part, it was. I mean, if you look at all of the offensive numbers, now it's been better. I was just looking at this under Dan Wilson, 19 and 13. Maybe they should have made, and again, we have the ability of hindsight now, right? Sure. So it's fair to say maybe they should have made a decision sooner. Maybe there was some things going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about within the clubhouse, within the makeup of the team. Certainly, we know on the offensive side that the organization told us what went wrong. They're on the third hitting coach, so I think that's the easiest way to do it. I think bigger picture, Julio struggling for as long as he did, that's the biggest problem for me, because you have all this money invested in him for him to be that have that poor of a season overall. Got to figure out a way for him to figure it out. We talked about this plenty along the way. Those are just, I think, for me, some of it. Injuries are always going to happen. I think the biggest thing that concerns me about next year is you had career seasons in a lot of ways with the pitching. It's hard. It's hard to repeat that next year. It just is. Logan Gilbert leads the league in innings pitched. And I know it's not a ton of innings by comparison to what we're used to 10 years ago, 15 years ago. He didn't go 230, 240, 250 or more innings. Still logged a lot of innings, and that's at max effort. And guys like that they had now they got to go out and try to repeat it next year, which is not that easy to do. As good as they are, it's not that easy.
Yeah, and then it just he gives this press conference. I want to ask you about this because I'm just curious on. I mean, I have my opinion. I think there's a lot of people in Seattle have their opinion on this
Sure.
one. I didn't like what happened this weekend. He holds an impromptu press conference. He hasn't talked really to the media a bunch this year, and he does an impromptu press conference Saturday in the dugout. There's no formal press conference at the end of the season for them. That was it. Something he called together a select few reporters that only knew 25 minutes or so before, and then did his press conference. You think that's how an ownership group and an organization should handle something like for an end of the year, especially for a team that had so many expectations placed on them for this season, to hold that press conference in a dugout?
It's certainly the area that you're most comfortable on the baseball side of things, but it's for me, it's too informal. I think your fan base deserves more than that. And maybe it's not necessarily a full-blown press conference like they did last year, because we know that didn't go very well. So I think you also have to take that into consideration a little bit. And not every team has end-of-season sit-downs, with an extended media presence. He could have, said, and I think partly this is a control thing, right? So you're speaking to the people that are there on a regular basis, not bringing in, outside media members, let's say, that aren't there on a regular basis. I'm sure there was some kind of control to that as well. But I do think that, there was, I think, a little bit more formal setting would have been appropriate, even if it was, you have a press conference set up, a table that's set up inside, and you're there as the manager and the general manager and maybe the owner too, where you're answering questions for whoever showed up that last day.
I mean, think about this, Jim. They've still yet to formally acknowledge that he's back next year. He didn't even address it this weekend. I mean, they're all we have is a report from two great reporters, Ryan Divish and Adam Jude of the Seattle Times. So, I mean, obviously it's correct, but we don't even have it confirmed by the organization that he truly is back. And then I think by not having a formal press conference, it doesn't allow people to ask the owner who writes the checks, why is he back?
Right.
9 years, one playoff appearance. It's a legitimate question.
Sure.
What made you decide to bring him back for a 10th year?
Yeah.
And you don't get that because they haven't even acknowledged that he's coming back yet.
Yeah. And I think that's fascinating because if you look around the game, we've seen some announcements even today, right? Cardinals are out there announcing a change in their front office, and they've had 2 losing seasons. So they're going to do something there. They just fired the president of baseball operations of San Francisco Giants, Farhan Zaidi, and named Buster Posey the president of baseball operations. They did that about 30 minutes ago, right? In Minnesota, after their collapse, the fans were chanting "Fire Rocco Baldelli." They were chanting "Fire Rocco" during the game. So that forced them to come out and say that their head of baseball ops and Rocco are going to return next year. So around the sport, you're seeing those type of situations when there's a question mark. And to be fair, there is a question mark there around this front office. Even if it meant it may not satisfy everybody, but even if he sent out a press release, they're coming back. Maybe that's coming. I don't know, but maybe that's forthcoming in the next week or two. I don't know. It's weird though how they operate up there sometimes.
You don't even know. Honestly, I think there's still some people in this town that are still uncertain. Like, is Dan Wilson the manager next year?
That's a fair question.
Even though what Dipoto said. Dipoto said it like in the Zoom press conference. This is not an interim label. He's the manager, but I still think there's some gray area. Well, how long? I mean, is it a 2-year deal? Like, how long is he the manager for? And still not really formally addressed by this ownership group.
Well, and I'll tell you, the thing that to me is, I'd be offended if I were a fan of this. I understand what they're trying to do, but it's against what is done within the industry. Is they're trying to control the narrative. Everyone tries to do that, right? But they're not forthcoming when we didn't even find out that Jerry Dipoto signed a long-term extension this summer until several months later. That's odd in itself. And usually, even if you don't want to discuss the terms, you say, listen, we came to an agreement. We've extended the president, our head of baseball operations, for another a number of years. You do it, within that time period. You do it on your own terms and decide to issue a press release in that way. Somebody is resistant to this. It's and I think there's probably a combination of both, because this is these are public companies. Even though the owners don't feel this way, there is it's a public trust that you owe your fan base these answers. And I think if you took that mindset, you'd be better off than not. And they seem to be taking the exact opposite tone and tact.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're all public assets, all of it. The public again, I get it. They own the team, but it's the public's team. It's the community's team. It's the city's team. And, on top of that, it's this community built that stadium with their money.
That's right.
So they are owed, I think, some explanations. All right. I mean, there's a lot that went into what happened this season. I guess we turn now to what could they possibly do? He did say that, hey, we feel our outfield is set. That we know, with Arozarena, obviously Julio and Robles were good. We need upgrades on the infield. One thing he kind of passed it off is like, we're not that far away. I don't know, Jim. I mean, you have a whole third base, second base, first base, DH. And I think you can make a real argument whether or not you truly are sold on your shortstop for the future. I mean, so there's 4 spots there.
That seems almost like the entire infield.
It is almost the entire infield. So I just when you have to replace almost your entire infield, when you hear someone say we feel like we're not that far off, how do you react to that?
Well, there's 9 guys on the field, 8 if you don't count the pitcher. Half of the team has got to be adjusted. That's a lot of players, and I think what he's trying to say. So you're not moving Crawford; he's there realistically, and you want him to get back to what he's capable of. But every other position, and we go back to conversations we had about first base. That to me is the likely scenario that they're going to upgrade. That it will cost the least, because they do have supposedly some payroll flexibility. I look at committed dollars and from this past year to next year, and there's not a lot there, but I'm looking at committed dollars of about a little bit above $100 million off of 165 that they had committed this year, and that off of that, I'm not picking up Polanco's option. There's no way there. Turner's not coming back. So those are the 2 that stand out for me right out of the gate. But you do have money to spend on a first baseman, and the market's going to be pretty good, I think, between Alonso, Christian Walker, Rhys Hoskins. Those are 3 off the top of my head. Now,
Goldschmidt.
Goldie, thank you. That's another one. So St. Louis, the Mets, Houston, they're going to all need first baseman. So you're going to have some competition there, but not all those guys had good seasons. And I think that you can find a power hitting first baseman there that won't cost you, $150 to $200 million, which seems to be outside of their budget, even though it shouldn't be.
Let me make a case for why I don't believe when they talk about payroll flexibility, and why I don't think that they'll be all that active in the free agent market. And again, we'll play this back next year when we talk, and I'm wrong. But they've got, they're going to keep, they said they're going to keep Arozarena. Well, he made $8 million last year. He's in arbitration. What does that jump to, 12?
He had I'd say an average year, so may not jump that much, but it's going to go up. Yeah, it might be 10, between 10 and 11. Yeah, but still, it's high. Yeah.
Cal Raleigh made $795,000. He's in the first year of his eligibility. He's going to win a Gold Glove. Well, he should, and he's going to win a Silver Slugger, which he should. So, what does he go to?
First year arbitration might be $4 million, somewhere in that range. It's going up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good bump. It's not a lot, but it's a good bump.
Gilbert was 4 this year. Gilbert goes to what?
7.
Okay. Kirby was same thing as Raleigh, $790,000, so minimum wage. He goes to 4?
3.5 to 4. Yep.
Okay. Julio jumps up. His contract goes from 11.9 to 19.9.
Yep. There's another 8. Yeah. So
again,
that adds
there's
up fast.
all this money. It adds up real fast, and then you're like, where's all the money? Like, again, this was an organization last year that was shedding payroll.
Right.
Their TV deal didn't get any better in the last year.
No.
Nothing's been resolved on that. So how am I supposed to believe with all these guys coming up that they're going to then go out and pay Alonso or Walker or somebody else all this money to come here?
Right. No, I think that's fair. I think that, the number they settled on this year was 165 roughly. I think that it's hard to imagine it would be higher than that. I think that that's probably the max. If you look at where they were this past year, attendance wise, I don't know. You would know better than me. Where did they go attendance wise? Were they up a little bit?
They were down. They were down, but not like 5% down. But
okay, so that's not horrible. I don't see them reducing the payroll by 5%. That's negligible. So it's, that, but I don't see it going up. I guess my point is, if you had a bit of a spike, in the payroll and the attendance, you could justify. Or if the prices go up, it's hard to charge more prices when you don't get higher prices when you don't go to the postseason. So they're kind of in flux here. That, like you said, their TV deal isn't getting any clearer. So they don't have more money to spend. It's unfortunately, when I was in these situations, the owner comes and say, you know what, you're going to be payroll neutral, and in this case that might be a victory, right? Because of what happened last year. But if that is the case. And all of those pay raises as we just kind of walk through, that's not going to leave an awful lot for the other areas. It's not just first base, as you said, that they need to upgrade. They need upgrades throughout. Yeah,
I'm just looking at the unrestricted free agent list at second base. We got Gleyber Torres, Brandon Drury.
Right.
Torres, that's kind of
Torres. I could see Torres on a 1-year deal, but here's the problem when you have a 1-year deal. Is he's going to a place where there's a good offensive hitter's park, so he can go reset himself and go back out on the market. If he's out there as a free agent, guess where he's not picking as his top 3 or 4 choices? T-Mobile. It's just not happening. Like he's
not going to go to hitter-friendly T-Mobile.
He's not going there. Okay. No. I mean, Edgar. If Edgar has a relationship with any of those guys, that might be convincing. Edgar's got to get involved in some way.
Well, that's going to be a huge offseason storyline. I mean, they're going to try to do everything they can to convince him to come back. I think they'll have to get creative. I think just talking to a few people, who are around it close, I think they don't seem to think that he would be willing to do it full time. That he doesn't want to travel. He doesn't want to go do that. Could he do it like on home games? Yes, and then kind of be in the ear of some of these guys. But to expect him to do it full time, that's probably not going to happen.
Right. And it's hard to convince guys like that to do this full time. It is a grind. That job is really tough. It's thankless. He could oversee. They could create, be creative and have an oversight, job that would oversee it, and you could do it from a distance. And then, like you said, do home games, certain number of home games. That would be great. Just having him involved. would help a ton. He could have impacts just on a one-on-one basis with 3 or 4 guys. You can tell he's already had that impact. So,
Sure.
There's a spot for him somewhere, maybe even if it isn't full time.
What do they have money committed? You mentioned no Polanco, don't pick up the options, $12 million. What do they do with the 2 Mitches? Haniger's $17 million player option that he will obviously exercise, and then they owe Garver $12.5 million. How do you handle those 2 guys?
I mean, there's no out with Haniger. He's in, like you said, he's got that option. I'm looking at it. The AAV is 14.5. AAV only comes into effect when you're talking about the luxury tax number. So they're not near the luxury tax number. It's not a big issue. But you're not going to be able to get rid of him. And Garver, you're hoping that he figured some things out and has a reset next year. But that's looking like dead money. And, you can maybe do a bad money for bad money contract. But those are hard to do. And they're not done as many. We used to do a decent amount of them. A couple a year you would see. They're not. They just aren't done as often. And this is one of those where you have to go, okay, it was a bad first year. What are we going to do to help and support him in year 2? That's going to make it better. And that's tricky sometimes, right? Because maybe it's catch a little bit more, and maybe Cal DHs a little bit more, and they kind of go feed off of each other that way. But and you're boxing yourself in that DH spot, where you're needing a full-time first baseman, which again, you could do it that way, but it's hard to rid yourself of bad contracts like that one.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to how they handle specifically Haniger here in the offseason. He talked about not wanting to get rid of their young pitchers. If I'm not mistaken, he basically bypassed. He named them all, but not Castillo. Do you think Castillo will be moved in the offseason?
I think that they have to if they're going to improve offensively, and they don't have the flexibility on the payroll. I know they said payroll flexibility, but part of that is finding one of your more expensive pitchers and trying to trade him. I think with Castillo, that's the guy that we've talked about this, but sometimes to get out from the money, you take the prospects, or you take a combination. Somebody's got some money they want to move to you. Take a little bit of that, and then take some prospects. You should be able to get out from most of the money. It's not in a horrible contract next year. I think it's $21 million for the next 3 seasons, 21.5, somewhere in that range, from an average annual value contract. So that I think would be easily movable, especially when you look at some of the other starters out there and what they're going to get. I mean, Corbin Burns going to be $200 million easily. Max Fried probably $180 million, somewhere along those lines. So some team out there might say, you know what, I want a pitcher like that, but I don't want to pay all that money. I'll go ahead and trade for Castillo. I think he's the best asset and gives you the most flexibility.
How much can you work around the fact that he has a no trade clause in there?
I think you work with him on that. It basically try to tell, there's plenty of no trade clauses that, it really, the no trade clause is really a don't trade me to someplace I don't want to go clause. So, it's like, okay, give me 3 teams that you'd be willing to go to, and we're going to make it work, and then you go back to them. Hey, there's a 4th team that I need you to consider because they're interested and we really want to move you. That's they just like, okay, don't trade me to the Miami Marlins or don't trade me to the White Sox. So they're trying to control that.
All right, who do you? Before I'm going to say, who do you like? What you think's going to happen here in the playoffs? I want to know what does Jim Duquette want to see? What do you want to see, and how do you want these playoffs to shake out?
I generally I like chaos, so I like the games today. That to me is amazing that we have 2 games today, even though one of them probably won't be played all that hard. But I'm a big believer. I like in some instances the high profile teams. I think for the sport, getting attention, we've made some strides on the time of game. We've made strides at the youth level. Participation is up over 10% over the last couple of years. Some of the initiatives on the bottom end of the sport are going well. So the time of game's going well. The attendance has been better. I think we need 1 or 2 years of high-profile World Series to bring attention to the casual fan and bring it back to our sport. So I wouldn't mind seeing a Dodgers, Yankees, Phillies, Dodgers. I know it's not necessarily the most popular take, but I think it would be good for our sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at what kind of where the sport is, if you're a baseball fan and you like to see brands, right? I mean, I think what would be good for the brand of baseball is, I think you want to see maybe like the Yankees. I mean, you could say Houston, but Yankees and Detroit. But because Detroit has been, it's a proud baseball franchise that's had a rich history, but has been down in the dumps for a long time. And then, of course, I think everybody wants to see the Dodgers and the Phillies, play for the NLCS. And I just think to get eyeballs on it, to make sure that it's the most appealing attraction and star attraction. I mean, it's East Coast, West Coast. Yeah, everybody, and Rob Manfred will do anything he possibly can in baseball to see the Dodgers play the Yankees. So you can get Ohtani versus Judge and Soto and all of it. That's what you want. That's what you want to see.
That would be the best, most interesting postseason that we've had in a long time. I mean, the Red Sox Dodgers there from what year was that? 19 maybe, I think, when the Red Sox won it.
Okay,
that was high profile. I think those are the ones that we're shooting for. Yeah, Atlanta, Houston was good, but it was coming out of COVID. So it's not as big as the ones where Ohtani has to be in it, and Judge, Judge and Soto, and like there you go. There's the marketing right there.
How much pressure is on him in the postseason? He's never been here before. These are where he has placed himself in legendary status, but it's regular season. But this is where you go to the next level.
It is. There's a little pressure. Yeah. I mean, I think, for him, just because of the salary, the contract itself, right? That in it's, I think that the good news for him is he's got such a good supporting cast. I mean, you got MVPs everywhere, that it doesn't have to always be about him. And I think that's where he's at his best is, he's been playing, I feel like, almost unrestricted without pressure. From the very beginning, and that's why you've seen such a good season for him.
We've loved having you on. It's been a blast this past year. Thank you so much for doing it every single week. Thank you for when we started, it's a different platform.
It's a different platform.
We went from the radio to this, and you jumped on board. You didn't hesitate. You said right when I talked to you 6 months ago, you said, I'm in, I'm all in, don't worry about it. And I honestly, so everyone can hear this, because I say this to you privately, I can't thank you enough for doing it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Meant the world to me that you said yes, and meant the world to me that Flat Stick stayed aboard. Jim Duquette every Monday with his former Mets and Orioles GM, all brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. In case you missed it, came in late, be up on YouTube, of course, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, and of course at pucksports.com.